Well, hello and welcome to another video. This is just a brief devlog, and I know it's been a while since my last one, for which I'm sorry. I say I'm sorry. I'm sorry to myself because these devlogs are largely for me. Fact of the matter is, I am working so many hours now in my job as a professional musician that I have way less time to sit and work on my game. And any time that I spend making videos documenting my progress is time that I'm not working on my game. So it's kind of a problem. On the one hand, I recognize how important these videos are for me to be able to refer back to, but on the other hand, I resent the amount of time it takes to make them. Anyway, let me show you what's new. Firstly, this is one of the biggest problems that I had in my game. Honestly, it's one of the reasons I got frustrated and stopped development. And I'll show you what it is, right? There are these interactable surfaces in the game. This was the last one that I actually started working on. I've added a bunch of other objects in here. So when you click on something, you'll notice that the background goes out of focus. If I click on one of these balls here, you'll see the effect, okay? But for the longest time, when you clicked on the flashlight, that's what happened. The game refused to focus on the flashlight and blur the background, and I could not figure out why. As it turns out, this was a ridiculously easy fix. Like, honestly, so easy, it's actually almost embarrassing. So here's the fix. When you open the static mesh of the flashlight in the static mesh editor, and you go and have a look here under show, and click show simple collision, there's nothing. There's no collision box. There's no simple collision box. There's a complex collision, which you'll see is essentially just the shape of the mesh modeled and then used as a collision box. Now, obviously, if you use complex collisions for everything, it has an impact on game performance because that's a lot more vertices to worry about. But in certain cases, sometimes you need to do that. And the fix for this is just to, well, I'll show you. Let me go back to here. Okay, and I'm going to switch complex collision off, right? Now we go down here and we set collision complexity and we select use complex collision as simple. That's it. That's it. It was literally as simple as that. And I'll show you. Let's just back up a little bit here and hit play from here. I'll have to go and switch the light on again because we can't see in the dark. I'm also having massive editor performance issues at the moment, which I'm still working on, but that's a subject for another video because I haven't solved that yet. And now, when we click on the flashlight, you'll see it focuses. Now, the reason this works is I'm using a line trace out of the camera that is providing the perspective for the first-person player. And that line trace is hitting anything that the player is looking at. And then I'm adjusting the depth of focus based on how far that line trace gets before it hits something. And if there is no collision component for an object for the line trace to hit, the camera won't focus on it. It was literally that simple. Unbelievable. Anyway, that is an issue that is now fixed. The next thing that's changed, and this is a big one, is I finally got tired of trying to deal with my buggy code that animates the sun that gets stuck at midday. And I know I said from the very beginning that I wanted to do everything myself, but the fact of the matter is, after doing some reading, I realized that a massive amount of developers who use this engine are all using the same code base for dealing with day-night cycles and weather. And it's a thing called UDS, which stands for Ultra Dynamic Sky. So I have a perfectly working time system now. I had to tie this into my existing code, which advances time based on tasks performed, but that was so easy because detaching it from the like shitty buggy code that I wrote and attaching it to this beautifully polished system was super easy, and it's all working fine now. I did have to pay actual money for it, but I'm pleased to say the entire code base for this system, and it'll get even more amazing when I show you the rest of it, cost me $40 US, which is, when you see what you get for $40, is nothing at all. Now, bear in mind the thing I'm about to show you now, I've accelerated the amount of time that it takes for the purposes of this video. Obviously, this will take longer to happen once the game is actually happening. But watch this. We're going to look at the sky. Oh, look, at the sky is nice and clear. What if the sky was slightly overcast? There we go. What if the sky was completely overcast? What would happen if it started raining? That was the editor shitting itself a little bit, but don't worry about that. And there we go, we have rain. Now the amazing thing about this system is, notice that objects in the world suddenly appear wet as well. It's hard to see here with these rocks, but if we go and have a look at flat surfaces like the car, you'll see there's a sheen to them because they're wet. If we run up here and look at the balcony, the steps on the balcony, you'll see that they're wet, right? This took some doing. I had to tie in a bunch of code to every single outdoor material in the game. And furthermore, there were plenty of materials in the game that didn't distinguish between whether they were being used indoors or outdoors, so I had to separate them. So this was about a week of work. Notice the beautiful paddles that form. I mean, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I can't think off the top of my head what the name of the guy who designed this plugin is, but I will put it on the screen right now when I'm editing this video so that you can see. It's honestly, if I think about the shit that I've spent money on in my life, this may be the best $40 I've ever spent in my life, because this code just works. It's unbelievably well documented and it's super easy to use. Okay, how about this? Let's say we want to go back to clear skies, or at least partially cloudy. There we go. It'll stop raining. Sun will come out. And if you give it enough time, the puddles will slowly dry up. Like they'll literally shrink. But that's not the end of it. What if we wanted to start snowing, let's say? There we go. The beauty of this is, and again, it'll take a while because I've set in timers for weather transitions, but I haven't set in timers for the amount of time that it takes, let's say, for puddles to form when it rains, or in the case of snow, for things to gradually get covered by snow. So this will take a little bit. I'll have a little walk around. You will see it happen in real time. But again, this required me to go and edit every single material that's outdoors to get it to react to this stuff. Now you'll see it's starting to, there we go. You'll see the snow starting to pile up. Objects that are standing outside will slowly gather a kind of crust of snow over them. If I go back to the car in the front drive, you'll see the same is true of that. You'll see snow gathering here on top of outdoor objects on the porch. And again, the guy who made this plugin documented all the code. It was time consuming, but actually really easy to implement. Look at that. Unbelievable. And the best part is, if we transition back to sunny, which I'm going to do again, the timers on these are set like to happen really, really fast. But yeah, if we wander around outside for a while, not only will the snow slowly melt, it will leave puddles. It's genuinely so satisfying. The only bug I've come across so far is that only on slopes does snow show up on grass. And I'm not quite sure why. I think it might have something to do with the angles of the textures. Yeah, there we go. See, there's the puddles. So yeah, there are. I'll tell you what. I'm gonna speed this video up. I'll pause it here and come back to you because I want to show you something else. Okay, so before I had pretty much jettisoned the idea of a nighttime that actually can progress the same way the daytime does. The whole idea was you will complete tasks until night falls, and then night will be the state that remains until the character goes to sleep and the next day begins. But because of this system, I don't even have to do that anymore. So if we keep advancing time, I see this technically still counts as daytime because I haven't fine-tuned the stuff. You'll see there are still daytime sounds playing. Oh, but yeah, that's the other thing. By the way, like my existing ambient sounds are tied into the new system as well. That took a bit of doing, but it's done. If I advance time one more time, it should transition to night sound effects. There we go. Now at the moment, the night sky is a little bit bright. And there's the moon. Now, I've set night brightness to low, but the sky is a little bit bright. There are like a million settings that I still need to tweak. But overall, I'm very, very happy with the system. The other thing is that in terms of weather effects, like let's say it starts raining now. I think it's this button to trigger rain. Yeah. So part of my whole thing was, well, maybe I should find a way to transition or fade out my existing sound effects when weather sound effects take over. But I mean, you can hear the crickets in the background, but like they're pretty subdued. And I'm not sure if it's even necessary, particularly if I go one step further and trigger a storm. So now we have thunder effects as well. Oh, and the best part is you can really see the wet effect at night. I mean, how amazing does that look? That's so cool. If we go inside, there's built-in occlusion. I must say the one thing that I don't necessarily like that much about the built-in occlusion is how sudden it is. So when you walk outside and then walk in, it's pretty sudden, whereas I have a more gradual curve for my own sound curves. But yeah, that's all still a work in progress as well. We will see where we end up with that. Okay, so that is the new weather system. So I have a series of notes here that I wanted to talk about, and one of them is house rebuild. Now, the reason house rebuild is a note is because at a certain point, I got so tired of my lighting issues, and because I switched over to Ultra Dynamic Sky, UDS, this new plugin, I started noticing lighting bugs again, because obviously this replaced my entire lighting system, and all of the little things that I did to try and mitigate the lighting issues all of a sudden came back. So I'm in the process of trying to work through that again. But suffice it to say, there are still a lot of lighting problems in the game. Random lights appearing in the middle of walls, all of the usual shit with light gathering in the corners and not reflecting properly. So what I did as a test project is I rebuilt the shed. I think I may actually have spoken about it in a previous video, I can't remember. But yeah, the little garden shed, which at the moment just contains a couple of random things. But when you go in here, you'll notice there's like no lighting issues at all. So I figured, okay, well, maybe I should just rebuild the entire house. But rebuilding the entire house is going to be a gigantic undertaking. So I started by rebuilding the cottage, which is all the way over here. And I started by making custom modular pieces based on the original modular pieces that I used to build most of my project in the first place. And it took days to get it all right and to rebuild the cottage. And I'm sorry to say that the end result was no better or worse than what I've ended up with at the moment. So I scrapped the whole thing. And I'm now back to square one. I have noticed that the pitch and yaw of the sun, in other words, the position of the sun relative to where I'm standing now, if it travels in a straight line like this, like it's doing at the moment, rather than at an angle across the sky, that does tend to mitigate a lot of the lighting problems. The other thing is that I've noticed that most of the lighting problems happen when the sun is low in the sky, and I'm honestly at the moment I'm kind of just leaning towards avoiding those times of day when I'm actually scripting events and the way the time works in the game, just to keep going with building my game and not spending all of my rapidly diminishing free time trying to squash bugs that I could avoid by, just learning to deal with the limitations of the engine. Okay, so that's that section. The next thing to mention is the new maze. So I was never happy with the old hedge maze. In particular, the textures looked really crappy compared to everything else that I was using. And I decided just before I did my last alpha build to replace the hedge maze textures with something I got off the Quixel Bridge store. I say store, I mean Quixel Bridge is free, but you know what I mean. And it basically dropped my frame rate to less than 10 frames a second if my character was even looking in the general direction of the hedge maze. So I went back to the Epic Games Store and I found this plugin, which is essentially a procedural generation hedge maze. And you can set it up so that it regenerates the maze every time you alter something like its position or whatever, or you unlock and then relock it. And there's a bunch of things that you can adjust in terms of the path width and whatever. And it will generate a maze every time that has one solution. Now, this works really well. You'll notice I've built a wall around it as well. And the reason for the wall around it is I thought to myself, at a certain point, the player is going to get tired of getting through the maze to get to this area over here, which is a little back gate off the property. And I do want to force the player to do the maze a couple of times, especially since this is now a procedurally generated maze, which means I can change it whenever I want. I can even change it while the player is in the maze, which I think would be amazing. Oh God, I can't believe I just said that. I'll just go ahead and say awesome. I think that would be awesome. But at a certain point, you're not going to want the player to have to go through the maze every time. So I put a locked door down here. Now, obviously, I've given the player the key at the moment, so the player can just get in through the door at the moment. So that's easy enough. And then get to that point. The only problem I have with this is this texture looks kind of basic. I mean, it's essentially just diamond shapes that are vaguely green with some sort of stick-looking textures in the background. Now, I'm not having a go. It's not like I could design anything better myself. You will notice I've built some movement in, which looks okay. It's kind of ripply. It kind of looks natural, but it can also look unnatural if you look at it for too long. And yeah, when you're going through the maze, if you're not paying too much attention, it looks fine. But if you stop and look at a texture for too long, it doesn't look great. So yeah, this is still a work in progress, but I did like the idea that I can have the maze change on the player over subsequent days or even while the player is in the maze. I really like that idea. That's something that I can continue to work with and look at. Okay, so the last thing to talk about in this video is this. I'm going to head over to my little test staging area over here. And this is something I've been busy with for probably 4 days at this point, and it honestly should not have taken me this long, but again, I have limited time. And after I finish a gig, Lonnie and I are playing outdoors in desert heat and at least two nights a week, and I really feel like a zombie after work. So I don't have that much time to work on it, but when I do, I generally get stuff solved eventually. Okay, so one of my ideas was I'm decorating a house, right? And I'm decorating a house based on a very small series of assets. Well, I say that. I mean, I've been collecting them for a while, so there's probably quite a few, but a lot of them are the same. It's cups and plates, it's furniture, it's, you know, kitchen stuff, it's food items, it's whatever. And I have my paintings. I'm also playing with the idea of having not all of the paintings be those creepy animatable ones, but that raises a whole other series of problems in that if you want the player to feel like they're tripping, and not every single painting is suddenly like a trippy thing that the player can look at, then you've got to ask yourself, why are only some of the paintings animating? So that means I would have to change the game design in as much as I would want to draw the player's attention to one particular painting at a time, which means I should only animate one particular painting at a time because that would be less performance heavy. Yeah, lots to think about. But another thing I thought about is, I mean, can any of us really say there's anything creepier than stuffed animals, right? So I went and found these free models that are on the internet. So I thought, how cool would it be if they started doing stuff like this? Now, this is very basic at this point, right? It's just breathing, okay? But imagine it's doing this in the house and it's dark and you just hear this noise and you put your flashlight on and you see that. And then it just stops. Now, it turns out the code to get that to happen was so complicated. First off, the only reason I can do that at all is because these are not static meshes. They're what they call skeletal meshes, which means you can apply animations to them. But I've been avoiding animating anything in my game just because it's a whole other side of Unreal Engine that I haven't had to touch because I'm making a first-person game. I don't have to animate a character. But I thought, okay, if I'm going to animate, you know, like a couple of things, like it'll be really simple, right? It turns out it's not. So, in order to animate this deer, there are 3 components necessary. The one is this blueprint that I made, which contains this base, which is just basically like a primitive shape with a wood texture on it, and then the skeletal mesh of the deer. The next one is the animation itself. Now, these animations came with this asset pack. And then the third one is an animation blueprint. Now, I didn't even know how to make one of these. I'm not going to get into the code here. At least in this video, because I barely understand it myself. After 4 days, I managed to get it to work. But suffice it to say, it was tricky, because the only way to tell the main blueprint when the animation is finished is by using the animation itself and putting in these things which are called notifiers. So the first one just plays the sound effect of the animal breathing. That sound, by the way, is a recording of either a lion or a tiger, which I changed the pitch of and edited slightly. It was the only animal breathing sound effect I could find. And again, this stuff can all change over time. The other thing I had to put in is this custom notifier called anim end. This tells the main blueprint that the animation is just finished. But you'll notice it's on frame 59 of 60 and animal breathing is on frame 1 of 60 instead of frame 0. This is because if these two are too close together, they end up triggering each other. It's a long story. I've been on, like I said, a rabbit hole. So part of the code to make the deer animate and to play the audio is in the deer blueprint, and part of it is in the animation blueprint. Yeah, and it doesn't look like complicated code compared to some of the stuff I've written, but I was delving into stuff that I've never actually had to do before, and it got really complicated and really confusing. Okay, I was going to go into more depth about this in this video, but really, like, I can't. I need to go and unravel the threads of the stuff that I've already written, and it's late and I'm tired, and it's my 1 day off a week, and honestly, as much as like making YouTube videos is fun, I'd much rather spend my time writing code than making YouTube videos, and it's going to take me ages to edit this because I'm a stammering, stuttering wreck at least 90% of the time. So that's the end of this video, and I will try and make more videos, but as my free time gets less, I would rather be spending more time coding and less time making videos. But thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.